Welcome to RedTeam Go. This is a webinar to walk you through the scheduling and daily logs modules in RedTeam Go. My name is Ted. I'm an implementation specialist here at RedTeam. I'm also joined by Eileen. She's another implementation specialist. She'll be taking care of the chat and the Q&A features within the Zoom call. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A, and I'll do my best to get to each of them. That being said, we're going to jump right in. The first thing I want to show is from our project dashboard in particular, and just to make sure we're speaking the same language. If we go up to the top left of our screen here, click on the RedTeam Go logo. This will be our global dashboard, but we're working with the schedule and the daily logs for one particular project. So we need to go to the project dashboard. So I'll go to the project that we want to create the schedule for. In the left side menu, if you scroll down to daily logs, you have two options. You have schedules and daily logs. We're actually going to skip over the daily logs for just a moment, and we're going to start working with the schedule. And then I'll show you how that can integrate with your daily logs. So I'll click on schedules. Because we have not previously created a schedule for this project, this window will pop up for us and ask us a couple of questions. It's going to ask if we want to use an existing template. So when we create a schedule, and I'll show you this momentarily, you have the option to save that schedule as a template to use in future projects. The default setting on this is no, but if you want to select yes, you can change that toggle and indicate which template you want to use. For today, I'm going to leave this with no. We're going to start a brand new one. The next question is asking if we want to add the cost codes that we already have in the project. This will migrate all of the cost codes from your bid worksheet into this schedule. If you want to start from scratch without using the cost codes that you already have in the project, you can select no, but again, the default setting for this is yes, that will use the cost codes. And then you need to confirm the scheduled start date. This will pull in here automatically for you, and then you can create. So when you create, it will create a Gantt chart type project schedule. And there may be several features in here that look familiar to you if you've used other project management or project scheduling software in the past. And I'll make sure to touch on those. The first thing I want to show you is we're a little condensed in this right side of the window. So we can go up here and click on this arrow to collapse this left side menu. We will work with these in just a little bit here, but just so we can provide a little bit more real estate to work with, I'm going to close that temporarily. Starting at the top, we've got the integration on or off. That's just a toggle. The integration is referring to the schedule being integrated with the daily logs and vice versa. And for any of you that work out in the field, maybe as a site superintendent, you're going to find that this is very powerful and very helpful. Up at the top right, you've got the save button. Right now, we haven't taken any actions or made any changes, so there's nothing for us to save. But as soon as we start updating this, modifying this, adding to it, making any changes at all, you'll see that this save button is not just going to be up there in the corner. It's going to start kind of glimmering and shining at you to try to get your attention, just to make sure that you save all the work that you put into this schedule. And I'll point that out once we have something to work with. In this toolbar down here, we have a bunch of different options. I'm going to go through each of them. Add items, we have two options, and I'm not going to show you the functionality just yet. I'm just going to kind of give you a broad overview, and then I'll show you how each of them work. So add items, we have two options. We can add a custom task or a cost code. Link and sequence. So this gets into the territory of the overlap between this functionality and maybe other scheduling softwares that you've used previously. So link and sequence creates what we call, for those of you who have never used any software like this before, this creates what we call a finish to start relationship. So what that will do is it will go through our list of cost codes in this case and make sure that one is finished before the next one begins. That's the finish to start relationship. And I'll provide a little bit more explanation of that shortly. Remove all links. When we click and sequence, again, it creates a finish to start relationship, which is going to move each of these bars out. And again, I'll show you that shortly. But you'll also see a line that connects the end of one item to the beginning of the next. So that's the finish to start. If we remove all links, it leaves all of these color-coded bars exactly where they are at that point, but it removes the lines that connect them, therefore removing those relationships. Reset will bring us back to this exact starting point that we're at right now. Add as template. I touched on this earlier, that when we're creating the schedule from scratch, it provides the option to use a template from a previous schedule. So as we build this schedule out, we'll have the option to save this as a template. Right now, I haven't put any work into this, so I'm not going to save this as a template. But just know, as you create your schedule and build it out, you will have the option to save it in the event that you want to use that schedule or something similar to it on a future project. Add as a baseline. I think this is really helpful in just kind of reverting back a little bit. Over on the left side menu over here, you see an option that says baselines. I'm going to close this for a second again. I'm sure that your experience is the same as mine, in that project schedules always change. So what you can do is you can create a baseline. So whether that's a monthly snapshot or weekly, or just kind of an on-demand kind of thing, if you want to compare what the original schedule looked like versus what it's kind of morphed into now, again, if you want to take the snapshot of the schedule on the first of every month or something along those lines, you can add a baseline, which again, essentially functions as a snapshot of that point in time. And then you can compare that against the original schedule just to see how far it's changed. Toggle full screen. Again, I use this arrow a couple of times to give us a little bit more room to work with. Toggle full screen is just going to give us a little bit more. So it blows it up to a full screen so you can really see everything. For right now, I'll leave it there. I'm sure it's a little bit easier for you to see. Print, you would think that print is just printing, but there's actually a handful of options in here. So we can click on print. We can title what we want to name this version or this snapshot as. So if we want to just put progress 12, 14, 23. We can present it either by printing it or saving it as a PDF. We can save it as a Gantt chart. And let me know in the chat or the Q&A if you're not familiar with Gantt charts. I'm happy to go into a little bit more detail with that. But we have the option to save it as a Gantt chart, as a calendar, or as a report. I'm going to leave it as a Gantt chart. And then if we're printing it, we have a bunch of different print formats available. So if you want to do letter size, legal, A4, any of these, banner, you have all of those available to you as well if you're printing. But if you notice down here, I touched on this a second ago, but we have the option to either print or save. If we opt to save it, it just saves it as a PDF, and then maybe you can save that or include that as an attachment if you're sending an email out to somebody. You have the option to save this as a single page. So what that will do is it will condense the entire project schedule into one page. If it's a long-term project, if it's a large project, that may condense it onto a page that may make it hard to read. So just keep that in mind if you're opting for the single page. A better use for that might be for a smaller shorter project, just so the items on the schedule are still legible for you. You can also filter a date range. I just arbitrarily picked today to show a progress of the project. Maybe today I want to show the date range from November 14th to December 14th, or whatever range, or week by week, whatever you want to do. You can narrow the date range so you're not showing the entire schedule if there's something in particular you're wanting to focus on. Any questions on that so far? I'll give you a minute to go into the chat to present any questions that you may have. Again, you can use the chat or the Q&A feature. Eileen is standing by waiting to let me know what questions you may have.
Looks like we are good right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, holidays. So if we look at the date range here, we've got the project start date to the committed substantial completion date. That's a pretty good range. The reason I'm pointing that out, when we're looking at holidays, when I click on this, it's not going to have every holiday that falls on the calendar. It's just going to show you the holidays that fall within this date range of the start to finish. So when I click on holidays, oh, I'm sorry, it's not showing. So obviously, Thanksgiving and Christmas fall within that date range. I'm not sure why it's not showing. I'll look into that for you. But if we had a full year project, when this is working correctly, it'll show you all the holidays that fall within that date range. Work days. I'm gonna skip this for 1 second to show you something on the chart itself. When I'm talking about the Gantt chart, again, for anybody who may not already be familiar with those, that's just this chart down here with the time span of each task on our list over here falling on the chart. So this is showing me that right now, before we've modified anything, everything is lasting 1 day. That's the default setting when we start the project. They're all starting and finishing on Thursday, the 21st. But when you look at some of these other days, you'll see that, for example, Friday is white, but then these next two are gray. That's because those are Saturdays and Sundays. So those are designated as non-working days. If we decide that we want to close Friday the 22nd for a company party or picnic or family event or whatever, we can click on, click on the date, the header at the top of the column, and it will ask us, because its current state is a working day, and I've already changed that inadvertently. I want to make this a non-work, or I just converted it from a non-working day back to a working day. So now, because it's currently a working day, if I want to close the office for a company picnic or whatever, we can now change this to a non-working day. Now you'll see that Friday, this specific Friday, is gray, indicating a non-working day. But we can also do the same thing in reverse. If we decide that we're going to work on this specific Saturday, we can convert this over to a working day. So I'm going to change this back. I'll change this back. All right. So the reason I took a detour to show you all of that is now when we go back up to working days, now we can indicate, we can make those changes across all Fridays or all Saturdays or all Mondays, whatever the case may be. If your normal operating procedure is that you're closed on Fridays, you can unselect the Friday, click save, and now you'll see as we go across, you'll be able to see that all Fridays are grayed out. We've also gone through and made a couple of changes. So now, as I mentioned before, the save button, if you can see, is kind of glimmering at us, trying to get our attention to make sure that we're saving our work. So I'll go ahead and save that. It's a good practice to get into. So now moving down into the actual Gantt chart itself, into the actual project schedule, you've got, and keep in mind that this is a test project that we created just for the sake of webinars. So this is not going to include every cost code that would be in an actual project. This is just for demonstration. So you've got all of your cost codes because I opted to pull all the cost codes from our bid worksheet into this schedule. They're all listed here, but there may be some in here that you don't need to schedule for, like general conditions is general. That's not necessarily something we need to align with a particular date. So we may just want to get rid of that. I can click on the three dots and delete. Are you sure you want to do this? It's just a safety in place to make sure you're not accidentally moving forward with an action that you didn't mean to take. So I'll go ahead and proceed. Now you see those general conditions that one cost code is gone. And we can go through and do the same thing throughout the rest of our cost codes. Again, a permit cost, that's a financial element. You may not necessarily need that on your project schedule. If you do, you can just leave it there. You also see to the left, we have those crossed arrows, so we can drag items around to wherever we want or need them to be. You'll also, for those of you, again, that are familiar with other project scheduling softwares, one of the things that that you may be used to seeing is a parent versus a child task. And what that means is if there are cost codes on here that fall under the work performed in another cost code. So for example, let's say plumbing, we want to be included within fire suppression. We can click and drag. And when I click and drag this around, you'll see it do a couple of different things. You'll see it either highlight the line between cost codes, or it will, well, okay. So I inadvertently, but for the sake of demonstration, this works. I dropped doors and hardware underneath plumbing, and you see that it's indented now. So now that is a child task to the parent task of plumbing. I understand operationally, real world, that doesn't make any sense, but just in terms of the function of the schedule, that's how that works. So I can do that with additional items as well. So now Jipboard is now under plumbing, which again, I understand doesn't make sense. But now we've got those two different items that fall within the parent task of plumbing. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. But now moving over into the actual Gantt chart, again, the default setting is that everything over here is 1 day duration. So you'll see that everything, again, begins and ends on Thursday, the 21st. But I can click on the border of the box, not the circle, but the border of the box, and I can drag that out. Maybe that's 2 days, and maybe this is, a bunch of days, whatever. And I can change the duration that way. I'll just do a few of these. Now, you see, I'm moving the Jipboard and the plumbing is moving with me because, and this is where I'm getting back into the parent versus child tasks. The plumbing parent task now encompasses the date range of all the child tasks underneath it. So doors and hardware is a child task of plumbing. So if I drag this out past where it currently is, the Jipboard will stay where it is, but the plumbing will adjust based on where I drag this to. Again, you can use the chat or the Q&A features if you need me to dig into that a little bit more. If you have any questions on that functionality, make sure to stop me and let me know. I mentioned earlier the link and sequence. So I made some changes here. But what I want to do is create, again, a finish to start relationship between all of these tasks. So what that's going to do, when I click on link and sequence, it's going to make sure that this task, the demo, is done before the concrete begins. So it will kick this out so that the start of this task falls after the end of this task. That's the finish to start. And it'll do that all the way down the line. So if I click on link and sequence, it's going to ask if I'm sure I want to do this. Again, it's telling you that it's going to create a finish to start relationship. So this is what it looks like. So the first task remains as that one day on Thursday, but that has to finish before the next one begins. So this ends at the end of Thursday. The concrete begins at the beginning of the day on Friday. You'll also see that it skips over the non-working days. So if I were to drag this out, even though, well, if I drag this out, you'll see that everything else moves in response to the end of this task because of the finish to start relationships. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? All right. So
Yeah, looks like
again,
we're good to go. Sorry.
okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, when I was just talking through it, I let you know that the link and sequence is going to create those relationships, and you can visually see that by these red lines. I can make an adjustment. Well, let me go back up here and remove all links. So I mentioned this when I was talking through it, but if I click on remove all links, it's going to leave everything exactly where it is. So for example, rough carpentry starting on the 28th and so on and so forth, it'll just remove those relationships. So if I do that, all those relationships are gone now. If I need to create a relationship, if I want to manually create a finish to start relationship, I can go up here to structural steel, hover over the little bubble, the circle that shows up when I hover, and just drag that circle to the start or to the beginning of the next item, the next task. So if I drag that down, we now have that finish to start relationship. And the same way will work, or the same function will work in any configuration. So if I want to make this a start to start relationship, I can use the start of that task, so the left side of that box, and drag it over to that circle. And now we have a start to start. Again, it moved it over here without any consideration for the previous task because we don't have a relationship between this task and this one. You can double click on any of these arrows and you'll get an arrow that pops or a window that pops up. Again, I manually made that a start to start. I can configure that however I want to. So if I want to change that to a finish to start, I can do that, or a finish to finish, whatever you need to do. Lag. So let's say, let me close this for a second. So let's look at structural steel and rough carpentry. Let's say I want to maintain this relationship, this finish to start relationship, but I need there to be one day in between the finish of one and the start of the other. I can double click on this arrow, maybe, there we go. And I can plug in one day, save, and it gives us that one day lag between the end of structural steel and the start of rough carpentry. We can also do the same thing in reverse. So if we want the rough carpentry to start one day before the end of structural steel, I can do a -1. So now you see that they overlap by one day because I did a lag of -1. Again, let me know if I need to spend a little bit more time on that. I'm happy to. So at this point, we've gone through and we've made a bunch of changes. Again, the save button is trying to get our attention. We'll go ahead and save. But if we've just made a complete mess of this schedule and we just want to start all over again, we can come up here and click reset. It moves everything back to the very beginning of the project, everything lasting one day, no relationships between any of them. It brings us back to square one. I'm not going to do that now because we've already built this out a little bit, but just know that if you need to start completely over again, you can hit reset. One of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is these red diamonds. You see one here and one here. These are your milestones. So these are not necessarily anything that take up any duration of time. They're just operationally significant events that happen. So the start of the project, operationally speaking, is significant. We want to mark that as a milestone, but that's not something that's going to take 3 days. It's just marking a specific point in time. And then the same thing, if we look over here, we got the other milestone. That's the project end, which again, the end is not a 5-day span. It's a specific point in time. So we're going to use that as a milestone. If there's additional milestones that we want to create, like let's say the electrical rough-in or something along those lines, what we can do, we can come up here to add items, create a custom task, and I'll name it. I think I said electrical rough-in. And we can change this drop down to a milestone. We need to tell it where on your calendar, where on your schedule that needs to fall. I'll just randomly pick the 28th. Because it's a milestone, it doesn't give us the option to provide a duration. If I change that to a task, now I can provide a duration. But I'm creating a milestone. Parent and root. You don't need a parent if you're not creating a parent to child relationship. But you also need to tell it where you want to plug this milestone in. So I want to plug that in to fall right after fire suppression or whatever makes sense for you in that project. So I'm going to make sure this shows up on my schedule just below this cost code, the 210000. So if I click save, oh, I didn't provide a date. I thought I had. All right. So now if we look over here, okay, so there's the fire suppression. I told it to plug my milestone in just below that. So there's our milestone, the electrical rough-in, and is represented by another red diamond on the 28th. That was the date that I randomly picked. So that's how that shows up. That's how you create the milestone, and that's how that shows up on your schedule. Any questions about any of that so far?
Doesn't look like we have any at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah. All right. So I mentioned earlier, I'm going to toggle full screen again. And I'm going to open this up. If I would, now that I've done some work in here, let's say I want to, well, let's go ahead and save because it's trying to get our attention. We can add as a baseline. So I'm going to go ahead and name this. I'll just say baseline 1. You can name it whatever you need it to be, and then click add. We've gotten an error. I believe that's on our end, but my gut says that it's still going to work for us. So if we go into baselines, yeah. So there's the baseline 1. That's the baseline that I just created. If you come up here, and I'm sorry, I kind of didn't articulate what I was doing there. So I created the baseline here, and then over on the left side menu, I went over, instead of being on the schedule, which is where we have been, I'm clicking on baselines. So that's the baseline that I just created. And you see, it looks very similar to what we've been working with. But now, if I want to compare what it looks like now versus what it was like at the beginning, and I'm sorry, that was my error. I should have saved 2 baselines. So I did not save the original schedule as a baseline. If I had, you would see the difference. For example, in concrete, on this line, you would see the purple box, but then within this line, you would also see a yellow box or a yellow bar to compare them side by side so you can see how the schedule has changed. All right, that's all I've got for the schedule for right now. Are there any questions about anything that we've covered so far on the schedule? Okay. So now, I mentioned that we were going to skip over this. We did this intentionally, but now we're going to look at daily logs. Before I do, just for demonstration purposes, let's look at demo. If you look in this column here, it shows us if we've awarded that scope to any subs. So this shows me that that's a sub. It's a .s cost code. So I'm going to just take a look real quick and see when we had them on the schedule to do that demo. So it looks like it's Thursday, September 21st. And the reason I'm looking at that is I want to come over here to the daily logs. We don't have any to look at yet. We will momentarily. Over on the side here, you've got different filters. So by default, it's going to show you all of your daily logs. But if you just want to look at the ones that have been approved or not approved, or even any that were designated as weather days, you have that option to filter the daily reports that you're looking at. And I'll show you that after we generate one or two. Over here, we've got the public versus private. What this is right now it's set to private. What that means is the only people that will have access to this are people within your project team for your company. So anybody, your project manager, your site superintendent, any of your own people that are on this project will be able to see these daily logs, but nobody outside of your company. Whereas public will let anybody on the project team see these daily logs. So whether that be subs, owners, architects, anything along those lines, if you have this set to public, everybody will be able to see your daily logs. That's obviously up to you where you need or want that setting to be. But I just wanted to make sure you understood the difference between those two. If we go over here to settings, we have a few different options. These two are based on checkboxes. So as we generate daily logs, they'll show up as a list down here. Each one will have its own checkbox. So if there's 3 of them, or maybe 5 of them, maybe we want to print or send all of the daily logs for last week. We can use the checkboxes for those particular days and either print or send those specific daily logs. Print a weather delay. I'm going to show you about that in just a minute. But if we have any weather days, we'll be able to print a separate log for that. The first option, though, is to set the weather threshold. So if there's something in your specs that spells out what qualifies, what criteria need to be met in order to qualify it as a weather day, as a weather delay day, we can click on set weather thresholds. And now you have a bunch of different weather conditions here. So if you want to, if the specs say anything above 50 miles an hour for a wind speed qualifies that to be a weather day, or a hurricane, or 5 inches of rain, or whatever, or a temperature of 130 or whatever. You can set those criteria here. And then when we go into create a daily log, which we do from this blue button here, it's going to open up this new window for us. You'll see, and this should load momentarily, you should see some weather forecasting in this box right here. But we'll talk about these other ones in the meantime. So you've got today's date. When you open this, when you go to create a daily log, it's going to default to today's date. If you need to change it, you can just click in that box. You'll get a calendar that pops up, and you can select the date that you need. You can set the weather conditions. Pretty generic, muddy, normal, windy, whatever. I'll just say normal. And then rainfall amount, if you need to document what the rainfall amount has been, you can do that there. Now you see that there was a little lag, but we see the weather forecast. So we've got at the 4 different times of the day, it's got the weather forecast for the zip code of the project. That's where the information pulls in from. So going all the way back to when we first created the project, this is one of the areas to demonstrate why it's important that you have a validated address when you're creating the project. If we don't have a validated address and it doesn't know which zip code to use to pull the weather forecast into this, it's not going to give you any information at all. So way back when you're creating the project, just make sure you're taking an extra second or two to make sure that the project address is a valid address.
And Ted, I'm sorry, when you do get to it, we do have a question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the question is the items that have Christina on the schedule, does that mean that the subcontractor assigned for everyone on the schedule was Christina? Or is this the name of the GC to show that those items haven't been assigned to a sub?
Great question. So that's the items that have not been assigned to a sub. So that would be the GC, whoever created the project, the bid estimate. We'll pull in there. So that's where Christine is coming from in there. Good question. Let me know if that does not answer your question. I'm happy to revisit that. All right, so in the again, this is the weather forecast, but if you want to document what the actual weather conditions have been, you can click on the three dots, edit the weather details, and now you can provide all kinds of detail about the weather. So if the weather was actually 124, and you set the weather thresholds to 120, you'll see that now this checkbox down here is automatically selected to show that we met the threshold for a weather day. Whereas if I change that to 30, you would have to manually unselect it. But if I select that we met the criteria for a weather day, that would generate an entry in the weather delay log. So that's clearly based on the thresholds that you set from before we came into this window. Moving further down, these next four fields from employees present down to others present, this is where you can document everybody that's on your job site that day. So employees present, you can add an employee. I'm sorry, go to the three dots, click on add employee, and you can select your employee. Let's see if I have anybody in here. All right, so there's me. I can put how many hours I worked on that project and then select a task, or even if they had, jury duty or something like that. Let's say I'm the site superintendent. You'll notice that this is a .L cost code. The only cost codes that will show up in this dropdown are .L cost codes because this is the employee section. So these are labor related tasks that we're assigning here. So I'll put that I was the site supervisor. If I decide that I didn't want to do that, I meant to do it on a different project or something like that, I can use the trash can. Otherwise, I can click on the three dots to add the next employee that worked on this project. The equipment present, I'm going to skip over that for just a second. I'll show you why. Contractors present. So if I click on the three dots and add a contractor, you'll see that this is the sub that was on the schedule for today. Well, actually, let me change that because I think I said the 21st was the one that we looked at. All right, so you've got the sub that's on the schedule for the 21st. You can select that sub, how many people they had working that day, how many man hours, and just remember that's the number of hours times the number of people. So let's say they all worked 8 hours, that's 32 hours, and then what they did. I'll just say roofing or whatever they may have done. Similar, you've got the trash can here, and you can add additional subs here by using the three dots. Others present, excuse me 1 second. Others present. So let's say it's an investment group that has you building this project, and they want to come down and check out the progress and tour the job site. You can use again the three dots to add somebody, and let's say it's the investment group and they've got 5 people with them, whatever. You can document just for documentation's sake who was on your job site that day, or you can just use the trash can to get rid of that. Going back to the equipment present, so this is, to me, this is a good risk management feature. Again, you've got the three dots over here. If you want to document some rented equipment that you've got sitting on your job site, I can click on the three dots, add equipment, and let's say, let me move that. Let's say you're renting a scissor lift from Sunbelt. You've got a calendar here to indicate maybe it's due back on the 26th. That way, it's a reminder so that scissor lift doesn't sit on your job site for an extra 3 months, incurring extra cost. So again, that's a risk management feature. It helps you save your budget. Again, these other three, the employees present, contractors, and others, lets you document which people were on your job site, but then this also lets you document what rented equipment you have and when it's due back, which from a project management standpoint, that's a huge help. Down here, you've got a couple of text windows. So tasks that were being worked on, it's just a free text field. You can document whatever you need to there. along with all the standard formatting tools. You can make something bold or red or underlined or whatever you need to do. And then comments and event changes. So the way I like to explain this is this is what you expected to happen, and this is what maybe actually happened. So if they were working in roofing and plumbing and this and that, and that's what you expect to happen that day, you can document it there. But then let's say you're doing demo in the building and you're taking a wall out and you run into 3 support columns that nobody told you about. They weren't on the drawings. You just got surprised by it. You can use that second text box, again, with all the formatting tools to document you were doing demo on this wall and we found these support poles that weren't mentioned on the drawings or whatever. There's a million different uses for that, but that's just one scenario. Attachments are just what you think they are. You can drag any attachments in here. So maybe you've got a porta potty on site and that vendor shows up on your job site with an invoice or something along those lines. If you want to include that as an attachment on this daily log, you can do that. It doesn't have to be invoices, just one example. And then photos. So one of the things that I really like about this, not necessarily from the desktop version, it works fine on the desktop version, but especially because this is intended to be the site superintendents that are generating these daily logs. If you're using the mobile app for RedTeam Go, when you're creating a daily log, you'll find that there's an option to add photos directly into the daily log. And it will give you the option to either open your camera and take a picture on the spot, or if you've already, maybe you got to the job site in the morning and you walked the job and took pictures. If you've already got them on your phone or on your tablet, the app will let you import those pictures from your device into this daily log. So this is one of the areas that the mobile app really pulls its weight. So you don't have to take a bunch of pictures, go back to the job trailer, back to the office, whatever, upload them, drag them in here. It just saves you a lot of time and a lot of extra steps. So for those of you who may be working out in the field, I think you'll definitely find a lot of value in that option using the mobile app. And then the request for PM approval, again, this is intended to be the site superintendent that's generating this. And then when you select this, it's going to send this to the project manager, to the PM for this project, to approve it. The settings that I have in my test environment here allow me to approve it, and I'm just going to go ahead and save it. And then the PM would receive this, would review the information. Maybe we want to use a different cost code for this, or add additional documentation, whatever. Then we can go ahead and approve it. Are you sure you want to go ahead and approve this? Yes, we are. All right. That's all I've got for the schedules and the daily logs. Thank you, everybody, for making time in your day to join us, and reach out if you have any questions, and have a great day. Thank you.